Okay, good morning and welcome to this interactive discussion. So this will be a collaborative discussion session and it will be led by our presenters Tavern Brooks and Linda Hazell, both of who I have firsthand experience in seeing the benefits of their student-centred approach to connecting through the Pathways programs amongst their various other roles and contributions to the university. So I'm really excited to be here and participate in this discussion. As part of the EdX conference, there'll be feedback collected along the way. So I'm just popping into the chat bar. Should be going a link to a Google form. So if you could please click on that now and have that open throughout the discussion, and then at the end I'll remind you to finish that up and submit that form. We will have about 50 minutes and we will need to finish on time so that we can all head into the panel discussion afterwards. So let us begin. I will hand over to the both of you. Thank you.
Thank you, and it's very nice to be here. So what we wanted to do in this session was to talk to you a little bit about this piece of technology that originally was being used by one of our colleagues at UOW in their media studies. And when COVID hit, it seemed like a very effective way of maintaining contact with the students. So we implemented this into the Pathways course specifically for WAGA students in 2020. This year, we've then included it and expanded its role within the subject Sci 174, which is about human anatomy. So we've then expanded it and opened it up. But this led us to have a really good think about the kinds of systems that we have available to us now and the kind of systems that we would like to have available to us, and where our current systems really fit into these categories between what we have and what we want. So we came up with a little bit of an ideal, this concept of systems that just work, not necessarily that attempt to provide solutions, but are right at the point of they just work. They're intuitive, they help students engage with us and with their peers. And we do try and take a bit of a progressive student-centered approach, particularly because the cohort that we're working with in the Pathways program tend to come from slightly more disadvantaged backgrounds. So we have to be very mindful of that whenever we're thinking about engaging them. So there's a couple of goals that we put together based on the literature, based on experience. What do we want our students to be able to achieve? And really, we've got to start defining that if we want to be able to then define what we're looking for in these systems that hopefully do work. We're hoping to develop some autonomy in their learning, and we're hoping to promote effective communication. This isn't news to anyone. When we start looking at the difference in terms of the value added to the education of these students, you know, we've had this massive change in the accessibility of information over the last few decades. And in many cases, some of the university courses at some universities that I have personally attended, and I'm not actually talking about CSU, have lagged behind in that updating of their information to really add value to the students. Okay, so how do we encourage these skills that really set the Google doctorate apart from a formal university education? And based on the literature, we're looking at the human connection, we're looking at the development of critical and metacognitive thinking, and we're thinking about those soft skills, which if you were at the previous session, there was quite a bit of discussion about that. So hopefully this ties into a little bit of that discussion and opens up some ideas for you to consider. So this is really centering the idea of the student not just as a learner, but also as a receiver of stories. So this is tapping into that kind of knowledges that we want to pass down to our students. How do we go about telling those stories through education? Obviously, we have the ability to do the more traditional forms of storytelling, the lecture, the tutorial, collaborative storytelling, to be able to create new ideas. But when we take that onto an online environment, as we've all found from practicing this, these traditional forms of storytelling don't necessarily work as effectively. Suddenly we're taking these concepts and we're packaging them into a video that can be seen at any time. It reduces that engagement and interaction. So why do we want to tell these stories? It's tapping into our imaginative processes. When we create and paint these pictures for our students in their minds, this allows them to create essentially a visual mental map of the information. This then allows them to be able to take that information and expand it into other areas. So for example, with our anatomy students, quite often we're trying to engage them in understanding one's own body, not just the diagrams on the page. We're really asking them to visualize what's happening in their own body. So we can create this space on campus, and there's been so many design experts, and we have some beautiful spaces on campus. But when we use online systems, what we are functionally doing is creating a visualized space. It's something that exists. Now, there's a lot of companies and technologies that leverage this even now. We can look at Facebook's idea of the metaverse. We can also look at the metaverses that currently exist, like IMVU. This is something that's been used by people for decades as a visual space that they exist in. So our students are fairly familiar with the idea of online spaces really existing, even if this is just really a concept. So the question then is, how do we get our students to interact with our online systems, and how do we change our online systems to then make them more welcoming and avoid them being less welcoming? And this really comes down to structural elements. So we're proposing this idea here. Okay, so the first thing that I'd like to open up for discussion is what's happening now? Where are we at now? What are the best or worst things about the platforms that you use for distance students? So Linda will put in the link for this Jamboard, and I will get it up here. Can you see that? And what you can do, sorry, is add a sticky note.
So if you just look to the side there, you'll see a little square box with writing on it. And what we're asking for is some of the things you like about the platforms you use with distance students, interactions. So whether you use a discussion forum, do you put them in Zoom breakout rooms or whatever? And what are the worst things about some of the platforms that you currently use for distance student interactions with each other?
And this doesn't just have to be about students either. This can be your own experiences of it being effective or not so effective for things like communicating with other staff in the subject or communicating with students.
And if you prefer just to unmute yourself and make a comment, that's fine too. Thank you to all those people that are putting points up. Very interesting there. I have the same problem with discussion boards, whoever put that one up.
Oh, I think I can give a bit of context for when I start the breakout rooms. There's a few students who leave the meeting guilty as charged the other day. I was on my phone tuning into one of the meetings, and then someone said, oh, we're doing a breakout room, and I've gone, I'm not in the right environment to be able to have this discussion.
It's Ruth Crawford here. I put up the comment about the discussion forums and losing them when I go to breakout rooms.
Yes, very true. I'm just trying to cluster the bits there that are about the discussion rooms together. So,
Ruth, it's Robin here, and that even happens. I was at a professional consultation webinar the other day on Zoom, and we lost quite a few once we went to the breakout rooms as well. So it happens in the wider world as well. People get nervous and duck off.
Yep, and I think that comment that we've just got there about a lack of interaction from students, that's a common problem that we all have, that we really want them to interact but have difficulty getting them to actually engage. Got a couple of points about Padlets over there.
I think Padlets are a very powerful advantage over a lot of discussion board formats, because they're really tapping into those ideas that are being used in the wider internet world. They're very visual.
Yep, and they feel a bit more informal too. I don't know about you, but the actual look of a discussion forum, to me, it seems very, I don't know, like it's an official place. Whereas a Padlet, because of the background and the colouring and the layout with the little post-its, it seems a lot less official and so less daunting, at least from my way of thinking.
I think that it's also good because you can embed them in your I don't know what you call it, your module or your topic, so that they don't have to go anywhere to make the comment, so they can just pop it straight in where they're reading and watching or doing something.
Yeah, I think this one that was just put up there, support is placed in a side menu, it never gets accessed, needs to be at the point of need. That's really important. If students have to go looking, they might look for 1 or 2 clicks and then they'll give up because they're just wasting time that they have not got enough of anyway. And I find this myself when I'm searching for staff resources, that if I can't find it, immediate search on the staff web page or the quick links, either I go and ask somebody who I think might know where it is, or I give up and just go it alone.
The worst thing we can do for our students is to make them feel like we're wasting their time.
I just want to share some feedback that I got from some students informally this year, and it was the end of session. We were talking about how things had gone, and it's obviously been such a challenging time for students, and a number of them commented, apologized for not engaging in the forums that I'd set up and doing some of those other things that I'd provided as opportunities. They said they just had to survive this year. They just had to get done what they had to get done, and that was all they could do. And so perhaps it was a little different this year. However, every year it's a chore to get that engagement, and it was just a little bit harder this year because of all the extra challenges.
Yep. Yeah, and I think it's like with many things, COVID has actually highlighted underlying weaknesses, so that if there was already a little bit of a soft issue there, it all of a sudden got really hard with the extra pressures on.
Definitely. So in essence, we did a very similar kind of thought experiment, finding, as has been mentioned on the Jamboard, that Interact2 discussion forum format, it promotes these long form answers, and it's reasonably okay at that, at gaining that interaction with, say, a tutorial question, but it's not particularly effective at encouraging students to interact with each other. You quite often find, even with introduction forums, you'll have multiple different threads, all started by different people, and no one's actually said hello to each other. So we thought, okay, well, if Muhammad cannot go to the mountain will have to come to Muhammad. So we started asking, well, where are the students? What are they using? And overwhelmingly, a lot of the on-campus students and the distance students informally told us that they were using things like Facebook chat and Snapchat, these much more informal systems that have the instantaneous function. They have this ability to create a notification. However, this becomes a little bit problematic for us as educators, because then that's creating a crossover between our personal lives and the professional, which is not necessarily always that conducive to student learning, and certainly not for work-life balance. So really approaching this idea, we took the concept of storytelling and put it together with this development. We're trying to encourage students to engage with each other, because we don't want them to just assume that there's one authority that gives a message. We want them to be able to be adaptable as they go into their work life. We want them to be able to engage with other communities, other stories, other sources of knowledge, to be able to stay up to date and relevant. So our students are already learning via virtual architectures. How many of our students have developed greater understandings of cultural awareness from threads on Twitter or videos on TikTok? You know, they're already learning these things. So how do we tap into that? One more concept before I answer that question. We take a bit of an approach of needs supportive learning. So we take the concepts of student learning and we ask, okay, what can that be divided into? What is a successful learner actually doing? And based on this theory, a successful learner has a high understanding of their own autonomy, as well as confidence in competence, and they also feel very secure in their relatedness. And obviously, this is not necessarily news to any of us. Again, we inherently add these into our resources for the students. In the Jamboard, if you go onto the next page, there's a couple of questions for you to start thinking about while I just talk about the connection between these two ideas. So our students are learning by teaching and helping other students. This peer learning is quite well supported by the research. This is the self-determination theory. If you can believe that you can do something, you can probably do it. If we want our students to effectively learn metacognitive skills and to be able to think about their own thinking and think about how to become more effective at whatever they're attempting to do, then we want them to engage in these group work activities. But as soon as you mention group work to any group of students, you'll hear a chorus of groans. The ability to work as a unit is essential in the working world and even in interpersonal relationships. The capacity to be able to communicate with each other and work towards a singular goal is a huge part of the rest of these students' lives. Why are they so resistant? There's a couple of theories. If groups are experiencing less positive interactions, then the students may not be feeling a sense of self-determination. They may not feel like this is a worthwhile use of their time. If we want to tap into those benefits of collaborative learning, we have to get the students explaining and discussing, elaborating, reflecting, asking questions. And I've noticed someone's added into the Jamboard being authentic as well. And that authenticness really builds into that sense of community and trust. How do we do this at the moment? Is Interact 2 a particularly good coordination and regulation tool for this kind of behavior, for the behavior we want to encourage? We want to move from being that direct influencer of that sense of relatedness, because this becomes very complex when we start talking about very large cohorts. We don't have the time to be able to create individual fulfilling relationships with every single student in our cohort. So how do we go about ensuring that our students feel supported and have this environment around them that supports their autonomy, relatedness, and their development of competence? So here I've just filled in those suggestions from the previous slide. These are the ones from the literature. And this is on page 2 of the Jamboard. So we're doing kind of page 2 and page 3. So you can flip between them and see where you might like to add something. Page 3 is essentially trying to fit in tactics. What can we implement? Now, we know from the literature, this is the kind of behavior that we're expecting to see if whatever we're implementing is working. But I left that blank just to see whether you had any other ideas about what you might expect to see from these students successfully engaging in these behaviors.
Can see somebody put a notice up there about breakout rooms. I like the comment there about essential to have specific and explicit tasks in breakout rooms. That's a really important thing that we found with our Discord working groups too, is that it helps a lot if they have particular things that they have to achieve. So it's the difference between just providing an environment where students can interact and actually giving them some structure about how their interactions are going to look when they, especially when they first start. Once they get underway, then they're okay. I'd just like to make a comment about breakout rooms in Zoom. Something that I find really frustrating in there is that once you leave the space, it's very hard to take the stuff with you. So to copy the chat thread and you've actually got to seriously think about how to do that. It's not easily accessible for you. And that's one thing that I love about Discord, is that the online chats and the stuff that you post stays there so that you can go back to it later after you've finished your discussion.
Linda, I get my students to use the whiteboard function and capture at least sort of a summary of perhaps whatever the answer to the question or whatever the task was on that, take a copy of it and bring it back to the larger group.
Yep, save it as an image. I've done that too, yeah.
Because I think as well, when students are in breakout rooms and when they're working, I sometimes forget that they might be on a small laptop or using their phone for bits. And so I flick between my screens because that makes sense. I've got, perhaps the Jamboard or whatever up on one screen and them on the other. And it makes quite a lot of sense for me to go, I can see what's going on in the Google Docs. But students having to flick between that, I think also part of that supportive learning is around not needing them to do so many things at once.
Yep. Or you drop them in the breakout room and they can't remember what the questions were.
Yes. Yeah. And I think as well, like I have made the assumption in the breakout room when you put the announcement out that it's very visible, it comes up, it's there for a while, but there's been times where students said, oh, it literally popped up and went away. And so we don't know what that was. And so, yeah, some of those assumptions I've made.
I've had the same experience with my own participating breakout rooms, that somebody's popped up a message and I've been busy talking or listening to somebody with my focus on them. And then I've realized, oh, there's a message just as it disappears. So very easy to miss. And this, I think it highlights something that we need to be really aware of, the sort of the ephemeral versus the persistent, that in group work, it helps a lot if there are places where students can work and can leave stuff that stays there. And again, this is something that Discord provides a really nice environment for that.
Yeah, and as well as to see what the other groups are doing, because sometimes you feel like, okay, I've given this group a specific task and they can work on that. But if they see, oh, you know, perhaps my question might be the first one, what does need supportive learning look like? And the second group might be doing, oh, what are platforms you use? Then those STEM ideas as well. So whilst sometimes you want isolated group and say, okay, no, we just want your view, sometimes these other things that pop up create better outcomes and discussions. And sorry, Ruth, I think you were going to say something. I cut you off there.
It's fine. I was going to, I guess, kind of pick up on what you were saying, in that I too learned through experience that, you know, students on a phone versus on a laptop, you know, the functionality is so different. And for me, it just made me think, you know, whilst we've, as academics, been supported to use Zoom, unless I've missed it, we haven't had the guidance of this real practical, if you want to do breakout rooms, you need, if you've got students on their phones, then you need to think about this. Like, and I think sometimes this is the challenge, where we have a sense of all these amazing technologies or things that we could use or do, but first we have to work out how to use them well enough and have the confidence to do it. And as someone said, I think in the previous session, the DLT website, there's amazing info on there, but you can't find it.
Yeah. It's very, very true. And the other thing is, you need to know what questions to ask. If you've never considered that something might be possible or that there's a different way of doing it, then you don't know to search for it. And so it's hard with that. I just noticed down there someone is talking about having trouble with the students can't actually get in the same place at the same time to interact. And again, this is something where we found that Discord helps enormously, because you've got that persistent record of the chat in there that they can visit at any time. Somebody who misses the meeting when the group is there live talking to each other may actually be able to contribute later, depending on whether it's been a voice chat that's not been recorded, or a text chat that has been recorded and that they can read and catch up later with what the other students were saying. So I think that recognizing, you know, that we need to make space for asynchronous communication and relationship as well as synchronous is really important.
And that's been of particular importance during the last year or so, with a lot of our students just not being able to visit campus, not being able to even at the moment. I mean, really, we've all had students like that.
Yep.
So what I might do, just in terms of timeliness, is I'll leave the autonomy, competence, and relatedness for you to think about. And I've just put some shapes on the Google Jamboard on page 3 for you to maybe use that to bounce off. You know, these are the behaviors that we're expecting to see if a student is successfully feeling autonomous and competence. They're going to feel that sense of confidence. They're going to be able to develop skills, and they're also going to be able to quantify that development of skills. Okay. So I'll leave that there for you to kind of mull over, and we might come back to it. What do you think, Linda?
Yeah, I think we need to keep moving.
Yeah. Okay, so then the next question is, how do we create this atmosphere of social presence? If our students need connectedness, and we need them to need connectedness because that's how we're going to get them to collaborate and learn in that peer learning environment, how do we actually create a welcoming environment for our students to feel comfortable and safe to express themselves and to explore their learning? Looking at the basic question of what do students actually want, they're coming back and saying they do want the human presence. They want that, you know, humanity there. they want passion, engagement, they want openness, they want to be able to have that access. That kind of perception of engagement is not solely on the lecturer themselves, though. And I think this is something that we tend to forget a little bit when we're dealing with distance students, is that in the traditional university campus setting, that engagement with learning, that engagement with new ideas, that fermentation of different fields to create new concepts often happens at the university pub. And this is just not a behavior that happens. So how do we replicate this? How do we replicate this in an online world, in a world where we're seeing our students withdrawing from social engagement? And this is where Discord comes in. So I will not plagiarize. I did lift this almost word for word from Linda's discussion on Discord. So if you want a more technical presentation of what Discord is, how it works, Linda's day one presentation is absolutely fantastic and I highly recommend it. So Discord is a server, it's a virtual space. It's this gallery, exhibition space, although I must admit the first time I tried to describe it, I said it was like a classroom block. So you can divide this communication environment into different sections. You can say, have your large amphitheaters where the lecturer might discuss concepts with the student body as a whole. You might have smaller working groups where you'll have 4 or 5 students engaging with each other on a close basis to be able to complete an assignment, for example. You can also then subdivide in many other ways to be able to group students from a particular campus, or students who are working under a specific lecturer, or students who are in a particular mode, etc. So, and it's quite easy to set up. So you can have something like a template that has a whole range of channels pre-populated. Then you can just create a link and provide it to your students. Your students then click the link, it adds them to the server. You can even add in a bot that will allow them to self-identify as part of a campus working group or role. And you can set up in the back end, and this is probably something that our learning designers are probably going to have discussions about, but you can then allow various parts of that server to unlock as the student identifies as a member of Wagga campus or a student. And it's got a lot of benefits. From a practical perspective, it means that group work can be accessed by all of the members. It seemed to significantly reduce the amount of students getting lost in the process of creating their groups for group work in our 2021 Sci 174 session. The members of those groups can also move entirely seamlessly from voice to image to video to sharing screen to voice, which allows them to be able to collaborate and also have their meeting on the same platform. So a lot of our students are using this in conjunction with, say, a Google document. So they'll all hop on there, they'll discuss it, they'll discuss via voice something that they really need to modify, and then they will move between those different formats. What's also beneficial is that you can have a space within that subject server for your staff, which only people who are given the academic role can access, so that you can then have conversations that you can just drop a message. So this allows you to have a little less formal communications, but allows you to create more of a rapport. And of course, as Linda mentioned in her presentation, these notifications where you can go at everyone, at people who are here, etc., really, really important. These are the benefits that we've found. So this is just a bit of a summary here. And I've just been informed I'm nearly out of time, so I will probably speed through the next few. We believe that Discord contributes to autonomy support. This is something that we're going to be investigating in a little bit more detail. So we're currently working on the ethics application, etc., for all of that at the moment. Its structure provides a framework virtual environment. We found that in practice, our students appreciate it and engage with each other and are quite successful at creating groups. And when they work really well. This always on peer environment is something that's supported by research as well. It means that the students can access this peer community for support at any time. Whether that means someone is on or not is another question, but it's giving that sense of agency that you can just go and say, hey, does anyone know when the maths test is on? Do you know what time we're supposed to start, the exam? We also think that Discord promotes this sense of relatedness because not only is it asynchronous and instantaneous, it also allows the students to separate themselves just a little bit from their on-campus identity. It allows them to create a little bit of personalization, and so you get this form of authentic anonymity where students are identifying who they are and where they come from and all of that kind of stuff, but they can communicate with each other with many of those categories kind of put to one side. In the research, 62% of programming students felt more comfortable when using Discord. Overwhelmingly, they believed that Discord allowed you to receive help at time. And most of them said that they enjoyed Discord. This is the same kind of messaging that we're getting from our students. In terms of a subscription to Discord, no, it's actually a free tool. I'm happy to kind of let Linda elaborate on that if you would like to. Okay, so I also wanted to talk a little bit just in the last few minutes about a couple of case studies. So these are some students who were involved in the pathways on Wagga campus. So I've attempted to de-identify them, and you can see that these are students who, at a glance, you might say they are likely to experience challenges. And for each one of these students, they did in fact experience significant challenges during 2021. Whilst the results aren't everything that we'd want, where every single student got through and achieved an HD, you can see that these are still positive outcomes. We have a student who's not managed to complete previous studies, now managing to complete their subject successfully. And these students are self-reporting that the use of Discord, that connectedness, that's playing a part in these positive outcomes. Am I trying to say that Discord is the answer, be all and end all for every single problem that you might have? No, but it is certainly an effective tool, and it's also really effective at being able to manage multiple classes, because you can do that in separate servers, and so you can manage multiple environments. And it also allows you to take a little bit more of an informal approach with some students. As you can see, we have our Wagga Pathway students. They formed a really great community during 2021. And a lot of this was because Discord was built into their experience. It was so built into their experience that during lockdown 2021, we had a bit of a photo competition going on with our Lego people. And I did have a photo from one of the other lecturers for the Pathways course. You know, it was even when we had the earthquake, you know, it was a picture of a chair that had fallen over. Wagga Wagga earthquake, we shall rebuild. Which the students seemed to enjoy. But we had good cohesiveness in the group, and Discord is an effective way of managing and creating this space.
And feedback from a lot of the other stuff on the other campuses about that sense of community that was lost with the lockdown. I think what you've done here has really gone a long way to overcome that for your Wagga students.
And particularly with the Lego figures. Now, this is very much a kind of primary school tactic, I understand. But, you know, we had the entire gang, and then some of the more at-risk students were actually provided with a Lego figure that they would then take around campus and take photos with and all of that kind of stuff. So it kept them engaged. It kept them in the loop.
So I've just been getting a few questions in the chat here. People interested in, you know, how to actually implement this. I think it's Ruth and Robin mainly. So just to answer some of that, so Discord is a separate program. It's like a separate application. The way we handled it in our Interact sites was to include it under the subject community. You know, normally where you'd have discussion board, you'd have the lecturer information. We would have another little Interact item there, which contained a link, which would then take them to the Discord server that related to the subject that we were teaching. And so by clicking that link, it would take them straight there. Because Tabin had set it up very cleverly to let them select their roles, so which campus they belong to, which working group they belong to, they could just pop in, answer a couple of simple questions, it would assign them and open up the bits that were relevant to them. Then they didn't have to see the whole platform that we could see as administrators in the background. So it is a little bit of work to set up because you need to make sure that you've got the environment set. But I would say it's a lot less work than basically, you know, trying to get your Interact site up. And once you've got a template, which Tabin has set up, then you can reuse that to just, you know, generate a new server every time you need it that follows a particular pattern that you're interested in, and it's completely modifiable. So if you get halfway through and you decide that you need another thread or something, I'll just open up this screen. This is like a blank server, so it doesn't contain any student information. And this was one image that I used during my talk. Down the edge, you've got a list of the servers. Okay, so these are all the different servers I belong to. You can think of each server as being like a particular building that then's got a number of rooms in it. Next to that, we've got a list of threads, and there's a mixture of chat threads and voice threads. I can see all of them, so it looks quite complex to me because I'm an administrator on this server. From a student's point of view, they may only see half a dozen threads, you know, the announcements, the, you know, general information from the lecturers, plus their working group and maybe a campus group or something like that. And the other thing is, if you click on a voice room, then anybody that enters that room is able to talk with you, you know, just simply that seamlessly, just by clicking. You can do screen shares, you can do file shares. There's a whole heap of stuff that we don't really have time to talk about today, but it's definitely worth looking at if you're interested in this space.
And actually, if you go into role selection, you can show off the click through.
That was an image, Tabin, not an actual.
Oh, right. Well, here you go. So you can see this is just a template one. If I click on student, it changes my role. And then I can unclick on it and I can click on academic staff, and I'm back to being academic staff. And from here, you can control what I can see. If you want to use this as a template, please don't modify the template itself. go into server settings, and there's actually a server template here. So you can just get that template link and copy it over, and it will create a new server for you.
And I'm sure Tabin and myself are happy to help people that are wanting to explore this a bit further. We've found it really useful. We're planning to try and get some hard numbers out so that we can kind of quantify how useful, but we haven't done that just yet. So, and as I said, you know, we started off with just like a foot in the water in 2020 and went full on in 2021. I think there's still things we can improve.
Definitely. And a lot of these things are very experimental to begin with. So did anyone have any other questions?
All pretty quiet there.
I think everybody's taking on board all of those as ideas, and some really good opportunity there for reflection about what we do and how it works and whether it works and what could be done better. And you've offered a solution for some of that. So I think definitely some opportunities for people to take some of this forward into their own practice.
My preference initially when I started the subject was to try and keep the students in Interact, but there's no chat functionality that I can find that's kind of what would you call it, that it's at the level that students would expect with a chat function now. So if you leave students without an option, they'll go onto Messenger, they'll go into, you know, Facebook, they'll go onto whatever else they're currently using, but then that leaves some of the students behind who maybe don't have an account or can't find where their group's meeting, and you end up with a mess. And this was me in 2030, I think, was I let the students decide where they were going to meet themselves, and had so much problems with students being excluded either deliberately or not deliberately, and I was unable to monitor or to just, you know, even confirm stories about what was happening with some students who were having problems. So Discord provides really good monitoring for the staff, and it means that everybody is there where they need to be, where they need to work with their group.
I don't think I've got anything to add, actually. I think, Linda, you summed it up really well.
Well, I guess that brings us to the end of this session, and I know that both of these guys will be happy for you to reach out to them for additional information. And I hope you have enjoyed today's discussion, and thank you very much for attending. Please return to your Google form and make sure that you submit that for feedback to DLT, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much. That was great.
Thank you for coming along.